What's going on, everyone? Jorge Aquino coming to you live and direct. This is indeed Tormenting Tarmac. It's the podcast where the enthusiast never dies. Hope this lovely day is finding you well. Today is June the 24th. It's a day after my son's fifth birthday today. So it's been a party festivity type vibe over in the Aquino household, in the Papa Tarmac household. Um, but the vibes and the parties don't stop there because tonight, on top of the fact that my son just turned 5 yesterday, what an honor and a treat to be celebrating our 200th episode this evening after literally more than 4.5 years. Me and my good friend Ron Morris went ahead and started this podcast back in September of 2021 with episodes releasing in January of 2022. And it's been nonstop. And we've had amazing guests. We've had amazing stories being told throughout the years and with amazing individuals from all over the spectrum, whether it be here in the local Phoenix area, but we've also gone throughout the country. And we've also had some amazing personalities throughout the automotive community here. And it is such a treat to continue that tradition here. Because speaking of stories, you can't tell stories on Tormenting Tarmac and then not try and get one of the best automotive storytellers in the game today. This man is well known throughout the entire community as not just only having one of the best car tastes anybody could ever have, but also having created a platform for so many individuals to be able to go ahead and come over to his garage and just tell all the stories about why they love car culture. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this evening is the founder of the VinWiki app, the host of the VinWiki YouTube channel, as well as the co-host of Car Trek. It's the one and only Ed Bolian right here on Tormenting Tarmac. My friend, it is a treat to have you on this podcast this evening. How are you, sir?
I am honored to be here, and congratulations on the growing children and, of course, 200 episodes. That is incredible. That's what it takes is consistency on all these platforms, and so I certainly tip my hat to you on that.
Thank you, man. It really means a lot. This us getting together has been probably about let's say almost a couple months in the making and whatnot. And you are a very busy man and you meet a lot of people. But allow me to tell this story to you. But you and I did get a chance to go ahead and meet a few years ago. You were down here for the Gold Rush rally back in 2022, and you were down at Radford. There was a Cars and Coffee that morning, and so you were taking time to go ahead and meet a few people and whatnot. Me and a buddy of mine were the last people you talked to before going for your driver instructions and whatnot. And you gave me 6 or 7 minutes of your time, and it was really cool. Like, I've been a fan of you for a long time, and then you were kind to me, and I'm like, how did this guy's the best. This guy's the coolest. So to be doing this 4.5 years later and whatnot is really, really cool. But let me start here, Ed, because we talk about storytelling on this podcast all the time. And that's what you have been doing with VinWiki for, call it, the last decade plus and whatnot. When you get a chance to go ahead and meet all these different individuals, like, how do you pitch it to them to be able to go ahead and come and hang out with you and just tell all the fun stories that they have a chance to go ahead? How do you break that ice? Because I know it's got to be difficult sometimes.
It is, and now that we're, I don't know, 2,500 stories in, it mostly is radiating from the storytelling community, the hundreds and hundreds of people that have been on the channel that have told us great stories. Generally, what happens is they just tell me, hey, you need to talk to so and so. He has this great story. I'm sure there's some more where that came from. And that's kind of how it tends to happen. And what usually happens is they show up, they're very nervous, and we get a few good stories out of them, and then they go through the next few months watching them roll out on the channel, and then they start a note in their phone and they come back a second time and they're amazing. And so there is always some warm up and some try maybe some liquid courage to make it help, but at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day it's always just about I want to make sure they all look like rock stars, that we are getting the best version of whatever their story is out of them, and that we can make it something that they're proud of. If they're
Yeah.
not, then what we're doing doesn't make any sense. I mean, the idea is not just to promote the VinWiki app or, use whatever makes the platforms work. It is really to immortalize these great stories of the automotive world. And so however they make it to me, I'm always excited. And sometimes, yeah, I don't even know what they're about to talk about. And that's usually the best kind because they're actually telling me the story. Usually they sit down and they start telling me the story, like to explain what they're about to say. And I'm like, stop, stop, stop. No, no. Tell me the first time. We'll turn the camera on. Just forget it's there. You're just talking to me. And I just say, tell me like you tell somebody at a bar. And
Yeah.
that's where we start.
Well, I feel like it's the most organic version of themselves because they're telling it exactly how you would expect them to tell it. If they tell it a second time, they either they either have this opportunity to go ahead and, oh, maybe I shouldn't say this or say that. It's like, no, no, no. Tell it exactly how you want to, because if not, then the story kind of falls all by the wayside to an extent, right?
It does. And, generally, if people haven't told a specific story over and over again and polished it to an extent that it's easy enough to regurgitate, they do have some anxiety or trepidation about, do I develop enough context? Am I going to over explain something? And of course, when you start fitting it to a YouTube context, is it going to be too short? Is it not going to, hold people's attention? And so that is where we start. Just tell me what happened, and then I will hear what you say, and I'll know that we need this bit of context that the world won't already know about you. And so we'll build the intro later. And then, if we really do need to seem more reflective and just to dial in the message, the point, the lesson, whatever it is that we're trying to get out of the story, we can build that last. And as long as we've got the right context, the right drama, the right intrigue, the right elements, and we explain it all well enough, then that point is going to land much more powerfully than if you started there and say, this is how I learned to do this. No, we're going to talk about the lesson and then the message.
I love that. So take me back for 1 second, because obviously the basis of the VinWiki YouTube channel came off the fact that you went ahead and created the VinWiki app and whatnot. Take, I always like people taking me back, but I also want to kind of get into your head for 1 second. Where was it throughout the entire process of your creating VinWiki and everything like that you thought to yourself, the storytelling will go ahead and lend well to the marketing of the app? How was it that you came to that? Because that to me is fascinating. Because after all these years, the VinWiki app is incredible, still really well used and whatnot. But like, the channel is now grown on its own and become such an enormous piece of U.S. automotive YouTubing and whatnot. So how does that come all together?
Yeah, so the app started as sort of an outcropping of several behaviors that I'd had in terms of keeping lists of VINs of all the cars I'd own on my own personal website or my blog, and then the ways that I'd sort of curated the histories of the cars that I was selling while working at Lamborghini Atlanta, and building the registry of manual LP640s, which is my favorite car. And so
Mine
those
too,
three
Ed.
behaviors, thank you. And so those three behaviors were really what the VinWiki app was designed to empower for everybody that had, an interest in different types of cars and different experiences, and just like the ways that we can make our stories with the car a more vibrant and a more accessible part of the car's history. But like most technology entrepreneurs, you think you're just going to tap that first domino, put it out there in the world, a butterfly flaps its wings in Kansas, and everybody downloads it and tells their friends. And it doesn't work that way at all.
Mhm.
And I learned very immediately that we did not remotely have the marketing budget to get where we needed to be in terms of a critical mass of users. And I had met a bunch of car YouTubers speaking at an event in Pittsburgh, their hangar party at the end of their Cars and Coffee season back in 2015. And I was talking about the Cannonball record, and I met that dude in blue and Rob Dahm and TJ Hunt and Dr. M3 and Evan Shanks and a handful of other people, including Rob Ferretti. And Rob and I had stayed in touch, and he was obviously a big fan of the Cannonball world and things like that. And Rob had come through Atlanta and done a drive in the manual LP640 that I had at the time, and had made a video that mentioned the VinWiki app very clearly and what it did. And it was the highest conversion effort we had ever had. We got probably 150 downloads that day, which was a moon landing at that point in our sort of company history. And so I recognized that, like, our audience is out there on YouTube, so we need to go and find them. And in reality, the stories that we were capturing were a blown up version of a post or a series of posts that would very much belong in the app. And so it was designed to be like the app post coming to life on your screen. And that's at least where it started. And magically, it was just perfect timing in 2017 that it was really a prime time to grow on YouTube. It was a very different world than trying to grow an audience today. And so
Yeah.
you look at a lot of our kind of age cohort of channel age on YouTube of me and Tyler and Freddie and Doug and all these guys that kind of started in that 2015 to 2018 window. And, we all saw a very similar early trajectory. And we weren't competing against the institutional money, the generational wealth money, or anything like that. It was because there wasn't that much of a business opportunity
Mhm.
on YouTube. I mean, the idea that like Shmi was a full-time YouTuber and DeMuro was a full-time YouTuber was really, really crazy.
Mhm.
So, it was one of those things where as it started to gain traction and it did work to get people over to the app, and then as the platform matured to the point that this could be a real business, that's kind of how the whole thing came together.
That's what a time to be alive back then, right, man? Genuinely, in 2015, 2016, I'd have been 25, 26. My wife and I had just gotten married like a few years back and whatnot. And so like I've seen YouTube and things of that nature, but there's this time frame of like 2015 on. Um, Shmi's blowing up. Sam Seen Through Glass is blowing up. You mentioned that dude in blue. Shout out to David Patterson and his Terminator Cobras videos from back in the day. And I've that dude is such an OG these days, but he was a kid back then. I remember him doing videos over at your house. I think he drove one of the LP 640s back in the day and
I think he's driven
whatnot.
a dozen of my cars. Yep.
He's yeah, like he's the man, like he's an OG, and that was such a cool time to go ahead and be seeing all these individuals blow up at the same time, but organically. There was an organicness about that time frame that I don't know if you see it quite as much these days. It's a little bit different. There are people who are doing it organically now, but there was this plethora of content creators, yourself included. It was like pick your not pick your poison, but pick of the litter more so. And it
Hmm.
was a really, really cool time to go ahead and see that like unfold in front of my eyes as somebody who was going ahead and taking in the content. And now 10 years later, I get a chance to go ahead and interview people like you guys but get a chance to go ahead and see how you guys did it. Let me mention something really quickly about the VinWiki app. I have a really good friend of mine. His name is Greg Oxer. Shout out to Greg. Hope you're listening, buddy. He called me earlier today, making sure that this podcast was going to happen. I'm like, it's happening, bro. And he tells me the other day. So Greg used to go ahead and work at Barrett Jackson, and so he had an LP 670 SV that was on the lot. I think a year and a half ago or something like that. And they were trying to go ahead and ensure that there was this SV that was a one of one color, and they couldn't verify it. And so him and a couple of others go to the trusted resource of the VinWiki app. And he tells me I can tell this story. He goes to it. He's able to put in the VIN. He's able to confirm that SV, which I cannot remember for the life of me what color it was, but they are
Grigio and
able to,
Torres.
the car. The car.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. And sure enough, it was a one of one. And he was like, VinWiki worked exceptionally. I recommend it to everybody. He's still got his VinWiki profile, still think active and whatnot. But like that is the sort of stuff the type of stories that and the type of use that the VinWiki app has been able to go ahead and provide after all these years and whatnot. That not just confirmation, but getting a chance to go ahead and meet. It was in a weird way, it was Tinder for cars back in the day before Tinder even kind of blew up and whatnot. And it's amazing how all these years later you have been able to go ahead and help so many individuals, you and the team over at VinWiki. That's super cool to go ahead and see that. When you look at it, because it's been has it been 10 years at this point, Ed?
10 years for the app, 9 years for the channel.
So how do you look at all the things that you accomplished then, you look at yourself where you're at now? Is there anything that you would have gone ahead and changed? You would have done better? You would have said, "Ah, oh, man, that didn't work. I wish I wouldn't have done that." Where's your head at?
When we started, the idea that you were going to invite a viewer to tune in every day to some random person telling them a story about a car that they didn't ask about was very, very foreign. The interview style or podcast style of automotive content was pretty unexplored. Certainly, Farah's podcast was successful, but it was mostly because his guest list was so amazing. And
Agreed.
so it wasn't that it was just rando car guys showing up. I mean, these were, heavy hitters in the industry. And so, I don't, when you kind of get to a point in life where people start asking you, like, well, what would you change or what would you do differently to tell your 18-year-old self? And man, I would tell him to do everything he did, because everything that I have done, I can easily point to the lesson I learned from something going really, really badly. And if those bad things don't happen, then I never get to where I'm at, because I don't learn and I don't make a better decision in the right moment. And
Yeah.
so, I'm very, very happy that it all played out that way. And I'm really, really happy that the model survived. That, I mean,
Hmm.
VinWiki car stories are generally unchanged since tomorrow will be our 9-year anniversary, June
Oh, how
25th,
cool is that, man? I
2017.
love
So
that. Congratulations.
I appreciate it. So thinking that it's been the same general format of just a guy sits in a creaky old Staples office chair, but in front of a bunch of broken car parts and weird lighting and a green alligator, it's like the weirdest thing in the world, but it just has worked, and it's kind of
Right.
taken a life of its own and become its own character in the
Hmm.
whole thing. And so, there were plenty of people that asked me, like, what are you doing? How's this going to work? And things like that. And, another wild part of the story is I tried desperately to not have it be a VinWiki channel.
Hmm.
My idea was that I would give VinWiki car stories to one of these other YouTubers that already had an audience, because I never imagined that we'd be able to develop our own. And so I shot and edited the first 25 with a friend of mine from church, and I offered them as like a package, like, here you go on a silver platter, here's some good 4K interview content. Can you release VinWiki car stories as an extra content item on your channel? And I asked Doug and Dom and Patterson and Freddie and all these guys, and they were like, no. People subscribe to see our adventures and our, experiences with these cars. They don't want rando guys showing up. And so, kind of as a, plan G, I was like,
Yeah.
well, I guess we're gonna just start rolling them out. And I remember to the editor, I was like, he's like, well, all right, when are you gonna release the next one? And I'm like, tomorrow? The idea of releasing them every day was a very foreign concept. And,
Yeah.
now we're at a place in YouTube's algorithmic life where daily uploads on long form content is not favorable.
Hmm.
We see that there's a lot more of like a parasitic element, that the next video hurts the one before it. And so, we've been through different things like that where it works really well or it works less well. And the answer is always just keep on doing what you're doing.
Right. No, I mean, that probably answers the question of why the Ed Bolian channel went ahead and started on top of VinWiki, but that's also probably having to do with you getting a chance to also show more of your own side of things and whatnot, as opposed to just focusing on all the stories and everything like that. But YouTube is such a scary beast. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and I don't even do YouTube to exactly the same extent. I just put the podcast episodes up on YouTube, but I
Yeah.
see the changes that have happened. Let's call it let's call it really the last 5 years, post, after the pandemic and whatnot. And it's just been the way that YouTube rewards the creator is such an interesting, in such a, is really an odd way. This is the best way I can go ahead and describe it. And I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but I've seen enough of your channel and I've seen enough of the Smoking Tire and even Doug and all these other individuals that it's like, yeah, I see the struggles. And thankfully, you guys are rewarding us by still continuing to create the content. But damn, if you told me tomorrow you were like, I don't think I'm gonna go ahead and do the videos. I'm gonna go ahead and focus on anything on something else. I'd be like, yeah, I get it. It's one of those I get it moments. So like, kudos for continuing to entertain us for so long and give us all these amazing stories. But also kudos to standing up to YouTube and be like, hey, you're not gonna kill me today. You know what I mean?
I consider it the honor of a lifetime to be able to share these stories with such a broad audience that I obviously wouldn't naturally have access to were it not the treatment of these platforms on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. And so I try as hard as I can not to ever take that for granted, and to
Sure.
be the best steward that I can of their time and their attention and all the people that make it possible, that give us the chance to, you know, finance crazy cars like this and take them on crazy drives and live this all out. And to really, even for me, the biggest honor is to be able to celebrate the stories of other people that
Hell
also
yes.
wouldn't have that audience, and that we can kind of collectively build it together so that everybody benefits as the channel
Mhm.
grows and as the exposure, gets broader. And so, I mean, the fact that it's 40, 50 million views a month and, 3 billion views or so far, it's impossible to wrap your head around of what that means. But the fact
Yeah.
that, so many people, come up to me and they tell me that, what it's meant to them, what the app has meant, what the videos have meant, what the stories are, how much they love the different storytellers that have been on here. Like I said, it's just the honor of a lifetime.
I love that, man. One of the other things that, of course, that you were so well known for before even when Wiki happened and whatnot was obviously we got to talk Cannonball. And for there are people, and I'm sure you get this all the time. There's people who love the Cannonball. There's others that are like, it's a little, it's a little, it's a little sketchy. To those, I say, if there was no laws, you'd do it too. You know what I mean? And it's the God honest truth. Now, you have been one of these flag bearers for such a long time. You got a chance to go ahead and complete it. And then you've been such a cool, outspoken individual in favor of it and whatnot. Take me back to high school Ed, because I've heard you talk about this a few times, but take me back to this insane concept of like, where I'm going to do it and not a single soul is going to stop me. And because it's still amazing. And additionally, it's even crazier to see, Ed, how in the last decade plus the times are just they keep getting so much smaller. And I'm like, yo, these roads are more patrolled than they were 12 years ago. How are you
That's
getting
true.
faster? So I'll ask that separately, but like talk me through this in high school as you're getting ready to plan it. Because when did you do it? Was it 2013 your run?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay. That's amazing, man.
Well, thank you. So, I was a student of automotive journalism growing up. I spent more time in AP physics class reading car magazines than I did listening. And so I was very, very fascinated by the way that automotive information and news was conveyed to an audience, right?
Yeah.
Obviously today it's wildly different than it was 20 years ago, but that to me was always really, really fascinating. And so I, would read about these Nürburgring lap times and 0 to 60 shootouts and lightning lap and all the things that all of our favorite magazines were doing. And I just thought, I was talking to my father one day and I said, it'd be cool is if they just took all the best cars built this year and a bunch of good drivers and they just got in one side of the country and raced to the other side of the country to kind of prove what the ultimate road trip car would be.
100%.
Not for 30 seconds or 5 seconds, but for, hours and hours. And he's like, oh, yeah, Cannonball. That sounds like you. And I had not heard of it until that point. And so I went out and did all the research and watched all the movies and read all the articles and learned about Brock Yates and read his book. And I was just like, you know what? This is the coolest thing ever. Because, even though I learned very quickly that it didn't really exist anymore. And events like the Gumball 3000 and other things had kind of taken up the mantle. No one had
Mhm.
really advanced the record since 1983, and
Yeah.
it was a different world in the same way that it's a different world today than it was in 2013. In 2013, it was a whole lot different than 1983, and so the technology that was available, the performance of the cars, the safety of the cars, and all that.
Mhm.
I was just fascinated by. And so, yes, I set that record of like, when I think about what I want my automotive resume to be, how cool would it be if it could just be distilled down into a single word? Cannonball. And so that sort of started the obsession. And it took me about 10 years to be able to afford the car and the gadgets and the countermeasures and find the right co-driver and all that. And many, many setbacks and many, many things. But of course, in that period, we got to see Alex Roy and Dave Maher do their run in the M5 and Richard Rawlings and Dennis Collins in the 550 Maranello. And so, which to me is like earth shattering news. Like, oh,
Hell
somebody else
yeah.
is thinking about this. This is
Yeah.
crazy. And so to have actually been able to do it was just the craziest thing. Not because it itself is the accomplishment or whatever that I needed,
Mhm.
but the fact that it was the right goal is what really landed with me. That this thing that I pursued, this thing that I chased for so long through a very difficult time in my life. You think about, I kind of set the goal at 18 and did it at 28. Like, that's a really hard time to figure out
Hmm.
who you are and who you want to be in the world. And it's obviously, I hope, more than just an outlaw cross country road racer. But the
Yeah.
fact that that was the right background obsession to sort of carry me through that difficult decade of life was really, really valuable.
Yeah.
And it was again such an honor to be able to accomplish it. And then, you kind of get a million emails of people that are like, "Oh, I want to do this and I want to do that and all this." And I honestly got tired of answering the same questions all over again, so I just put them all in a Facebook group together, and that sort of
Smart.
became the community.
Yeah.
And that was probably a really bad idea in the way that RICO laws work, but it has not been a problem just yet. So that became a really, really vibrant part of my life. And obviously, it's
Yeah.
become a big part of VinWiki story content. Now, when we started talking about Cannonball, everyone didn't want to hear about it. And so we kind of had to shove it down their throats a little bit. But today it is a big part of what people anticipate.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a wild, let's say 6 years now of Cannonball news.
I love it, dude, because here's here's what sometimes I don't think people want to hear. And I think you'll agree with me. The premise, you can make the premise that yeah, it's cool to go ahead and see who can do New York to Redondo Beach, if you will, the fastest. It's just under 3,000 miles. What is it, like 2,900 and some and change or something? And that's cool and all. But to me, and this is what I go ahead and explain to friends of mine who are automotive enthusiasts but are not necessarily a fan of the Cannonball, is it's also proving that some of the road laws that we have in 2026 and that we had in 2013, and hell, if you even want to go back to the 80s, they may be a little bit, what's the word, antiquated. What say you?
I think that the issue in America is that the standards for driving are so low, and it
Agreed.
is one of the easiest places in the world to get a driver's license, and we have a very different strategy on enforcement, and a lot of it's because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wanted to eliminate speed limits or to raise them drastically or change the ways that they're enforced, the first thing that you would do politically is radically increase the penalties for violations. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a DUI or an at-fault accident, or you're texting while driving, or you're distracted, or you're driving a car that is unsafe, the penalties don't need to be a $200 fine or a whatever. It needs to be thousands and thousands of dollars. It needs to be something that truly discourages those things. Because if we eliminate distracted driving and if we eliminate dangerous issues like that are not going fast, then we would be ready to entertain the idea of driving fast.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been approached by a whole lot of different producers for movies and documentaries and things like that about redoing Cannonball or whatever the case may be. And in reality, I mean, it's like three sweaty guys going fast and not getting in trouble and not having much going on because it was surgically done, not because
Mm-hmm.
we're some kind of geniuses, but we had thought through the protocols of how you deal with this and how you manage that and how the car should be and how you communicate and how the nutrition works and who's paying attention to what and how that's going to be relayed and how that's all going to work. And it did. And we it should have taken us several attempts to do it, but we got very fortunate with expensive gas, reducing the number of vacation drivers, and new limiters on trucks that reduced the number of semis that were trying to pass each other at a 2 mile an hour differential. And
Mm-hmm.
so it came together better than we had any business doing it for reasons that were wildly outside of our control. And, does it prove that speed limits are not worthwhile? No, it absolutely does not. Because I have never driven in a way that felt as safe as that because I
Mm-hmm.
don't drive where three adult men are fully focused on the idea of getting somewhere safely and without complication. If we did that, perhaps, yes, if you were only allowed to go on a highway, if there were, people with high-powered binoculars and everybody making sure and the car had been serviced in every imaginable way the week before, sure, yeah, well, we can go as fast as we want. But that's not realistic, and that's not the way they do it in Germany or anywhere else. And
Right.
so, we just have a very different driving paradigm. And to be honest, most of the laws are entirely appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. That I think that. I think you gave a reasonably honest answer, but I do still think that some speed limits do need to be raised. I do feel that in 2026, even, and by the way, it's not just the cars that we have right now, like cars that are 10 years old, cars that are 20 years old, are still so safe that they can go ahead and reach safer speed limits that are a little bit higher that will allow. My biggest thing has always been, you and I both live in two major metropolises here in this country. I live in the Phoenix metropolitan area. You live at ATL Metro. I don't care what anybody says. Those are two of the most horrific metropolitan areas to drive in anywhere on this country. In this country, excuse me. I was going to say on the planet, but to be quite honest, Tokyo and London are ridiculous, and I
That's
can't
right.
even
It's not
imagine
been
Mexico
yet.
City.
There you
But
go.
my biggest thing is that flow of traffic, whether or not me trying to go ahead and get home, like it's from my commute coming from downtown Phoenix to the western end of the city here is it's 34 miles, but it is on average anywhere between an hour to an hour and 10 minutes to go ahead and get back home. I
Mm.
would like to go ahead and alleviate that by quite some bit. And yeah, we have carpool lanes and whatnot, but here in the state of Arizona, they are enforced by having to need two or more people in the car or electric vehicles, which they are now starting to go ahead and remove that bit. And it's only going back to just two or more in the car. And I think to myself, it's not, if they raise those limits now, we then run the risk of people then going faster than what the new posted speed limit will be. And that can create accidents because of what you just said, our low standards on driver education, if you will, if we can use that word. But at the same time, if we went ahead and raised driver education, perhaps this isn't as much of a problem. If instead of my driver's license expiring in the year of 2054 when it's set to expire, which is absolute flipping insanity when I think about it, because I will not look the way that I look right now, let me tell you. But instead, like it here in the state of Arizona, if you went ahead and set it to expire maybe every 10 years, and then you had to kind of retake and relearn, because also traffic laws do change from the last time you may have gotten your driver's license.
Mhm.
And maybe I won't know it because I haven't read up on it and I may not have caught that news bit and whatnot. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. I mean, but the reality is that the requirements for you to get your license when you turned 15 for learners or 16 for a full license weren't enough anyway, and that's why we have
Facts.
four-lane discipline and
Yeah,
confusion about where to yield and all these things. And so, yes, I think there's a world where that could happen. And once again, it just comes back to truly penalizing the behaviors that are counterproductive.
I hear you. So in that entire time of, because it was just under 30 hours that you've completed it, when you think about it to this day, I remember one of the VinWiki stories you went ahead and put up, and it was actually your Amex bill that was that almost caused everything to get ruined. So aside from the Amex problem, what do you think was one of the more difficult things as you were trying to accomplish this with your two drivers and whatnot? Because obviously, stamina and endurance have to go ahead and go hand in hand and whatnot. Aside from the fact that you're trying to go ahead and make sure that I hope state troopers don't just go ahead and pop up out of nowhere and we missed one, because you have aerial coverage, you've got your radio scanners and stuff like that. But even then, something can pop out of nowhere. So what were some of the more difficult things aside, or maybe it was the Amex bill that was the biggest problem? What would you say?
The biggest unexpected thing was actually sunset. And it should make
Oh,
perfect sense that if you're going
yeah.
to drive due west,
Mm-hmm.
for more than a day, at some point you are going to be driving straight into the sun.
Happens
And
to me every time I come home, brother.
that's it. But in Georgia, where there's hills everywhere, we don't think
Yeah.
that way. And so we got out there and we were in Arizona and I'm driving and it is just straight into the sun. And, I'm 6.5 feet tall, so I can't use the visors to see anything. And so I'm holding my hand up and trying to drive fast, and the trucks are struggling as well. And I mean, you've obviously been out there to do it. And so what we learned since then, what we do now, if we do it in these old cheap cars or whatever we do, is you take painter's tape and you put tape over the windshield where the sun is when you're on a straight road. And race car
Wow.
drivers do it on a if they're coming around a lap and they know that at some point they're going to be blinded by the sun, they just block that out for the rest of the time as well because it's just not worth being able to see as much. And so that was really, really hard because
Mhm.
the not only were we somewhat blinded, but we could manage that. But the issue is that your behind you is totally black. And so the truckers couldn't see us. And, we were not trying to do anything wildly reckless in terms of the ways that we were passing, but we were at a speed delta.
Yeah.
And so we were honestly going so fast that the CB antenna was flexing enough that it wasn't working all that well. And so we had a
That's
Swift
such a
truck.
flex in and of itself, brother. Let me tell you.
Well, we other things we didn't anticipate for the first round. We go
Yeah.
with little thicker antennas now, but we had it wasn't a Swift, it was a FedEx truck that kind of merged right on top of me, and I had to put two wheels off, and it was perfectly fine and under control.
Yeah.
But that was the closest call that we had, and it wasn't
Mhm.
his fault, and it wasn't really that. I mean, we were probably going too fast, but it was all. That was the thing that we realized. But then after that, you're going through all the twisties and Ash Fork, and it was your eyes are destroyed. And so we had to do a shorter driver stint so my co-driver could drive for a bit. And so that was one of those things we really didn't anticipate, but now of course we know, and we all have the right tools in the toolbox.
No, for sure. 13 years later, would you, with all the technology that we have available, with all the great cars, although, cars from the times that you and I were growing up in would actually still work brilliantly to this day, but would you try and go ahead and go for the record again? Or do you think that the numbers have gotten to an insane point that it makes it not necessarily impossible because people are doing them, but it is getting to a point where in order for you to go ahead and maybe match that, the level of, I don't want to use the word recklessness, but let's, for lack
The
of a
risk
better word,
profile has
the risk
changed. Yeah.
profile. Thank you. The risk profile becomes so much more higher. Is that something? Let's say you didn't have a family or anything like that. Is that something that you'd be willing to try and take on again?
Well, the thing that I look to in contemplating that question, which comes up both internally and externally quite often, is that, when you try to do something that's a big goal,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, it doesn't live up to the hype. You get the
Mhm.
car and it's not that cool after a month, or you go to that place and, apart from the taking the same picture as the postcard you saw, it's really not that great. And if you turn in the other direction, it's not pyramids, it's a tight city or whatever it is. This was it. Like it was so much more than I ever could have dreamt of or bargained for or hoped for. Like everything that it became was so much bigger, so much more fun, so much more cathartic, so much more satisfying than it had any business being. And so I was not left thinking about anything. It was
Mhm.
just as cleansing as it could possibly be. And in fact, we're like flying home, and my co-driver, who knew a lot less about Cannonball, that had just kind of been the gun for hire to come in and go join me after some other exotic car adventures, he's thinking about, oh man, if we had this or that, or would this have gone different, or this, whatever. And I'm like, no, that's as well as anybody's going to be able to do it for a very, very long time. And I'm quite
Yeah.
confident in that. And so, it it was enough in such a way that I didn't need anything else. Now, I did come to learn that there was sort of another interpretation in the fork of Cannonball interpretation was an event called the 2904, where we did some cheap car racing where you had to race for $1 a mile, spend less than $2,904 to drive across the country. And I did several of those, and I have loved it. It is much less serious. It is not nearly as fast, but it is a blast. And so I think
Nice.
I've done it 10 times since then, never in the same vein of competitiveness, but having a lot of fun in doing it. And so that certainly kept me from feeling the need to ever really go out and advance it. And when Doug and Arnie beat my record in at the end of 2019,
Mhm.
it was obviously hard. It was a big part of my identity in the same way that it had been Alex Roy's before me. And so I didn't know what it was going to be like to wake up the next day and address the same audience and talk about the same kind of things when it was like I'm a former record holder or whatever that means. And fortunately though, at that point we were pregnant with my second child, our daughter, and as she was born, literally like the week that the COVID shutdowns began in March of
Yeah.
2020, which happened to also be exactly at the time that we started shooting Car Trek. And so,
Hmm.
when I look at the season of life that is now 11 Car Trek challenges of buying ridiculous cars and going on a crazy adventure and filming it and taking pictures and all that, like that is so much more fun than
Yeah.
Cannonball ever was, that I get to play budget Top Gear, that it's something that fortunately I don't need. And when you look at what it would now take, apart
Yeah.
from a global pandemic shutdown. Um,
Facts. That is something that I always forget to take into account is the fact that the roads were empty for them in 2020 when
and
they
the
ran it.
cops weren't working, so it was a
Yep.
different world. But I mean, in the run that beat me before COVID, and then all the COVID record, I mean, they had 35 spotter cars that they had agreed to pay tickets for, and that were running at pace right ahead of them,
Yeah.
and giving them real-time data on everything to central mission control with much faster cars, and much more resources than I ever could have dreamt of. And literally spending 10x what I spent to have done this. And good on them. And it has, for them, in the same way, been the fulfillment of that same kind of goal. And for that, I
Yeah.
have, my hat continues to be off to them. But to think about what it would really take today, you are talking about dozens and dozens of spotters and a ridiculously fast car, and potentially a different driving protocol, because you're talking about averaging 115, 120 miles an hour, that you're going to be cruising at much, much higher speeds, which I
Mhm.
still believe can be done within the safety expectations and paradigm of the event. But you're talking about a situation that's a little bit self-defeating, that almost anybody who has the means to afford to do it happens to have gotten those means by being smart enough not to.
It ain't easy. Let me tell you, it's not easy. I've it's been something I've thought of, not necessarily like seriously. Well, that's not true. I've thought about it seriously, but I also recognize at the time in my life that I'm in right now, I have three boys. I have a wife. If I go ahead and tell her, "Hey, listen, I'm going to New York. I'll see you in a couple days." The hell are you going to New York for?
Yeah.
You know? Um, but it's so interesting. Let me ask you something though, because over the last few years, over the last decade, 2 decades, if you will, the type of cars that have been used for the Cannonball run and stuff like that are not the same type of style of vehicles that we would have seen originally going for the Cannonball records back in the day, in their heyday. Because you look back and you go back to the early and the mid 70s and stuff like that, they were using real, real sports cars of the time, right? They were using the SC 911s, and they were using C3 or C2 Corvettes and Shelby Cobras and whatnot. But now we use and if I'm not mistaken, was it a CL55 that you went ahead and used for yours? You
Mhm.
mentioned Alex Roy. Shout out to him. He's out here in the Phoenix area, hanging out without in our fair city, and you love to see it. He had an E39 M5. Um, uh, Doug and Arnie, it was an Audi S6 that they went ahead and put the front end of a Ford Taurus on. So my point is that we're using super sedans or sedans or big coupe cruisers and things of that nature, as opposed to using those sports cars. I bring that up because obviously you being a huge fan of the LP640, could the LP640 actually survive a cannonball run attempt?
No, not. I mean, it could survive an attempt. It could not set a record.
Yeah,
You couldn't put enough fuel in the front to minimize the stops enough to make it practical. And
yeah.
having put darn near 100,000 miles on Lamborghinis, orthopedically, it is prohibitive.
Orthopedically, I love
Um,
that.
so I don't know if they would be fun to use a sports car. And if you think about the Ferrari Daytona from
Mhm.
71, or the Dino from 75, or the 308 from 83, the fact that they were doing it in sports cars, supercars for sure of the day, is awesome. But
Yeah.
so could you do it in 812 comp? Yes.
Yes.
Could you do it in a 458, 488, F8, 296? A 296, maybe.
Mhm.
You could certainly do those times again today, but we are now talking about going, 10 hours faster. And
And
so you
also
still,
two people instead of three, because there's no way you could fit a third person in either of
yeah.
those cars that you mentioned.
And if I were to do it today to try to shoot for 24 hours, I would only take two people and I would do no countermeasures inside the car.
Oh, okay.
Everything monitoring police would be external, communicated through a single person into the
Mhm.
car. And the only thing that happens in the car is navigation and surveying road quality. That's
Interesting.
that's all we're doing. And
Okay.
so in that case, if one person needs to sleep for 30 minutes or whatever, which you really wouldn't need to in a 24-hour stint, you could because you're
Mhm.
constantly in communication with somebody else who's got access to cameras and all the other things. And so doing it in, a big V12 Ferrari, the GTC4 Lusso, or a Bentley Continental Speed, or any of these things, you could easily accomplish it.
Fair enough. You know, we've brought up the Cannonball as the movie as well, but back in the heyday, and I'll tell you what, I've watched both movies, and I'd love to go ahead and get your take on this. I have to imagine that you have watched the Gumball Rally movie
Mhm.
from that same time. If I were to say that I think that movie is actually better than the Cannonball Run, what's your thoughts?
Wouldn't argue with with the cinematic quality there. You're probably
Okay.
right. Obviously the fact that Brock Yates is
Yeah,
in
of
Cannonball and
course.
the cast is insane. And I, uh, I think there are so many other things about it, the
Mhm.
opening scene with the Countach and
Of
stuff like that,
course. So
that just
iconic.
becomes more transformative of
Mhm.
car culture than Gumball did.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say that while it may have been a better movie in terms of the entertainment of it, it didn't have a better impact.
agreed.
And I think a lot of times we're watching older films today thinking more about impact rather than it needing to be, a perfect Oscar-worthy production.
I completely understand. I mean, at the end of the day, both of them are both so great. Obviously, there's a little bit more iconicness to the Cannonball Run in and of itself. But for anybody out there, you want a movie recommendation from your boy, the Gumball Rally is exceptionally a fantastic car film with the car credentials going insane. Um, Ed, Car Trek has been such an, that it's fair to say that Car Trek basically kind of became your second half of where you have become as an automotive YouTuber over these last, 6 years now. You mentioned 11 challenges, 11 seasons, if you will, with, shout out to Freddie, and never met him, but I know he's just an awesome individual from everything that I've heard. I have met Tyler twice at Barrett Jackson. He's always been a delight to me, and I very much appreciate what he brings to the table. But you mentioned the fact that you started doing this in the middle of the pandemic, as well as your daughter getting ready to be born and whatnot. That took you, Tyler, and Freddie to a whole different platform and a whole different plateau. And you also went ahead and brought a sense of joy into our lives with Freddie and with Tyler in a time that we really needed it. And I know you know this because obviously, I think when the first one released, it was like September or October of 2020 when it released.
Probably so.
Yeah,
Hopefully it was before that, but we shot
yeah,
it in
yeah.
March. But yeah,
But
something
you
around.
shot it in March, but when it released, it was then.
Yeah.
And so it was during a time because you're experiencing this just as anybody else is. We're stuck at home. We don't know what's happening. The world is in the weirdest place we've ever seen it in our lifetimes and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But you
We're
guys
all
got a
done with
chance to go
Tiger
ahead.
King. We got to get something
Oh
new.
my God, Tiger King! Shout out to Joe Exotic. Good God, what a callback that was. But you know, it was amazing. And if you haven't been thanked for this, along with Freddie and Tyler, I'll thank you from my perspective because heck, there was automotive journalists who really couldn't do their jobs for a really long time, or they had to kind of like mix it up a little bit and whatnot. But you guys went out there and you guys provided us this amazing entertainment and whatnot, and it allowed you guys to continue to do what you wanted to do. But you guys brought a real sense of like togetherness in the automotive community during that time that I felt was really needed. when somebody says something like that to you and to Tyler and to Freddie, like how do you take that and what did it mean to be able to release something like that in a time where we're kind of stuck at home and we really can't do as much as we would have liked at that time?
Well, thank you very much. It's one of those things where, again, it comes down to being the right steward of both our opportunities and everyone's attention that tunes in to watch. And the fact that we learned with Freddie taking a $1,500 Plymouth Voyager minivan and restoring it to its Pimp My Ride glory, 8 million views an episode at a time, it illustrated that we were at a point where YouTube viewership could rival cable.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were true, then we could justify doing more. And it created the opportunity for a different paradigm of brand deals. And fortunately, Auto Tempest and the Ticket Clinic were open to, having a very different view on what a cost structure might look like for a YouTube production. And we were able to do it. And I mean, I think if you'd asked any of us, like, well, what do you really want to be when you grow up? And like, I want to play Top Gear.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're able to take this opportunity and move it in that direction is, the manifestation of that ultimate dream. And then I think beyond that, yes, trying to build a product that people would enjoy, that we also knew many of them would hate because no one can live up to that trio doing what they do best. And that's why the most of the remakes and all the, new cast and all this has always been a big struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And will continue to be because there's no bar higher.
Agreed.
And the fact that it can even be mentioned in the same breath as, something that we look up to so greatly is unbelievable. And so, the reality of what made it work was how fun it is. And so the idea that we can go out there and buy some terrible, terrible car and have an excuse to do so, and
Yeah.
then take it to some place it doesn't belong and not make it, but then figure out a way to get where we have to be and overcome, it's the right recipe, but it doesn't work very well. And it's the fact that you sort of get to the finish line and you look in the mirror and you are so dirty and you are so tired and the car is so broken and somehow maybe it's still working or it's on the side of the road somewhere and you're just like, man, I don't know how any of that worked and we're not in the hospital.
Yeah. How many times did you, Freddie, and Tyler ask yourselves, man, or tell yourselves this was a real crappy car to buy?
Oh man. I mean, and we also got into some situations where we realized that the car was like too good and
Oh,
like this was
facts.
not gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we're now at a point where 11 premises in, we're struggling a bit to come up with the next one.
Sure.
And we're not really sure, to be quite honest. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, but you've kind of like you kind of, and Freddie has done this more than any of us, is you get to this point where there's no more up to go in
Yeah.
terms of what
Well,
you're
it's
talking
your
about.
it's what happened with you with the cannonball. Like you reached the goal, and it's like it's cleansing almost.
Yeah.
But in that circumstance, not to put the pressure on you, Freddie and Tyler, but it's like, oh man, we want to see the boys get back at it one more time and whatnot. But it must be a good thing when us as a collective community are all clamoring together. It's like, hey guys, we want and need more card trek. The community, the culture needs more card trek, especially now that Jeremy, Richard, and James have tipped their hats to us and said, it's been a good run. And thank you very much for the love. And by the way, I have nothing but love and admiration for the Throttle House dudes and Francis taking over the Grand Tour. I am super stoked for that.
Yep.
But in the meantime, and not even in the meantime, it can go alongside because it's proven that it can go alongside. It is something cool and awesome for us to still have the opportunity to see you, Freddie, and Tyler get back at it again as many times as you. Life is short. You know what I'm saying? Life is short,
Sure
and
is.
you
It
know
sure is.
why not? Why not have the best of times with your friends and stuff like that and get paid for it? You know what I'm saying, Ed?
Well, that's always the goal. And,
Amen to
that's one of
that.
those things where, YouTube does not it self-finance things the way that the
Mhm.
BBC does. And so,
Facts.
the
And
fact that we
Amazon
have been
Studios,
able
apparently.
to make it exist within the financial confines of the platform is with the greatest of appreciation to the sponsors that make it work. Is one of those things that I think is also really really cool because if and we've had many offers to do this on television channels and other things like that, but the problem is that they won't shoot with the schedules that we keep. And
Yeah.
so if we say we're going to shoot 3, 5, 7 episodes, we say that's a week or 9 days, and it's 9 awful days of
Yeah.
18 hours of misery and fixing cars overnight and struggling to figure it out. But they want to shoot for an amount of time that would just keep us from being able to do the day job of making real content. And
Or being
so
with your family, most importantly, on top of that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, when we did 9 and 10, it was like back to back with Monterey Car Week and another event I had for another sponsor. And so I was on the road for like 22 days or something like that. And with a young family, that is really, really hard.
It's
And that
tough.
is not necessarily the way I see this season of my life consistently playing out. I'm happy to do it when it works, and we can certainly do it. But yeah, there will be more to come. I don't know exactly when or how, but we'll do it.
Whenever it is, we'll be ready. I ain't gonna go ahead and push you to it, but at the same time, I'm hyped. I'm ready to roll. Let's get another season up in the books. You love to see it.
Mm.
I have to ask you this because one of the things that obviously I think that you are extremely well known for, on top of Car Trek, on top of VinWiki, on top of the Cannonball and whatnot, is your insane taste in cars, my friend. And I'm not being biased. I promise you, I'm not being biased. Just because the LP640 is my all-time favorite car doesn't mean that I'm being biased. Because you got the Diablo Victoria's Secret right behind you with the hood popped open, and you love to see it. The Veyron entered the fleet about a year and a half ago. Massive congratulations on that, and you love to see it. But you know what's actually been one of my low key favorite cars of your entire collection and your fleet over the years? It's going to shock you. Shock the shit out of me when I thought about this, but I love it anyway. It was the blue SLR McLaren Roadster that Paris Hilton used to own. That to me was the one of the, if not the most iconic car you've owned. I understand Floyd Mayweather's attached to the Veyron. Fully understand it. No problem. I understand that the Verde Draco Mercy LP640 is, what is it, 65,000 miles at this point or something like that, something crazy. But that SLR, the fact that that is as famous as the photo that it is famous for, you want to look it up, go look it up. Y'all already know what I'm talking about. That car, though, how is it, Ed, that you and people like, shout out to John Tamarian and all these car hunters and everybody that's been on VinWiki for such a long time. What do you think about it is that you guys are able to find not just the deals, but it's to find the cars with the right stories and you know where they are. How in the world do you find these things, dude? Because that's amazing. On my best day, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I loved that car very, very dearly.
I'm
And
sad. I'm sad you don't
it's
have it, man.
I
I'm
know it.
sad.
Its Bulgarian owner has been a wonderful steward of the car, and I enjoyed his the meaningful amount of cryptocurrency he exchanged for it. Um, But the reason that it works is there are so many cars with great stories out there.
Yeah.
And, I think that in reality, the SLR fit in this, really powerful kind of part of the trade lineage to get up to the Bugatti. And so it couldn't stay, unfortunately. But I did love it, and I drove it a lot and took it on Gold Rush and had a blast. And I, it is probably the car that I miss most. And oddly, it's one that everybody loves. Everybody had that great memory of it. And every time anybody was in the garage, they wanted to climb three of them in there and kind of put the Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan pose in it.
What an
And
iconic trio, man. Let me tell you. We talk about Jeremy, James, and Richard, but I'm not sure they're as iconic as Brittany, Paris, and Lindsay in their heyday. That's crazy,
that would
man.
do views. That would do views
Do
today.
views.
Watch it. I have several windscreen covers to keep the cars cool of that
Yeah.
picture, and so I usually
Oh,
carry
man.
those
I
with
love
me
it.
road trips.
So
But
good.
no, I did like that one a lot. But, I think in the pop culture world of interesting cars that are tied to attractive women, the white car is doing its job.
The white car is doing a-okay for sure. But I listen, man. I got nothing but love for you. You've been an enormous inspiration for all the years, but we got a little bit of a beef because I personally think that I think you had a little bit to do with the Mercy LP640 shooting up in prices the way that it did, man. I think you did a little bit too good of a job. You know what I mean?
That may be fair. There are so many people that tell me that and they're like, "No, I can't buy them." I was like, "I've been saying to buy these cars no matter what it
It's
takes
true. It's
for
true.
20 years
Yeah,
now."
I mean, so have I. And listen, I couldn't afford it in 20 years ago. I still can't afford them now. And so, like, it's just one of those things. It is what it is. I jokingly, obviously, say everything that I say.
I get it.
But
I get it.
it's
But what
so,
happened was, I did the research that the
as one
research
should.
itself did not move the market. The fact that there are at least four other people that have taken my research and stockpiled these cars for different seasons of their value did. So, there was one guy that had eight of them at one point. There's one guy that had six. There's one guy that's gone through 10 of them. And so other people, read my homework and were like,
Yeah.
huh, I
Read or
agree with
copied,
that.
Ed? I
I
think
like
it was
that
more
thesis.
copied.
They like the thesis and they happen to have the money to actually deploy
Yeah.
it.
No,
And
I
so I
agree.
can't fault them for that.
I can't fault them either. I jokingly fault you, of course. I've more so it's the fact that you have enormous taste and you've always had the great taste and whatnot. Although I do jokingly always tell people that I have beef with Manny Koshman because he did it even harder with the SLR McLaren. You got into it at the right time and you went ahead and made what you needed to do happen for the Veyron and stuff like that. But Homeboy's got like 15 of them over at his house, and I'm just like, yo, man, spread the wealth, brother. That's all I'm
Well,
saying.
and if we're honest, he hasn't moved the SLR market. And so you would
True.
argue that the 640 market probably does what it does without
Yeah.
me.
That's
But
true.
I
That's
uh,
very true.
I at least was the one yelling off the highest soapbox for the while.
I hear you. I hear you. It's interesting because we've seen the LP640 as well as the first generation, in particular in the 6-speed format. It has gone up. Obviously, the first gen not quite as high up to this extent where the LP640 has gotten. Obviously, the Mercy SV market is the top, tippy top and whatnot. But what we're starting to go ahead and because you follow the trends, you follow the market about as well as anybody, I would say. We're starting to see Aventadors start to go ahead and climb up in first gens. SVs and SVJs have held for wherever they may be. Ultimates obviously hold where they are. And the Countach market and the Mira market is obviously gone, bonkers and whatnot. There's been one car of the V12s that's always had it's holding in an interesting way where if you are to buy it right now, you want to, and it is the first couple years, the first few years of Diablo, right? I would say that non pop up headlight Diablos are probably the ones that are the most expensive. Your 6.0s, your Diablo GTs, they're so rare, but like first year of Diablo, like you could still get at a what I would consider a relatively reasonable price for what the market is. And
Sure.
I'm just curious, you being a Lambo V12 expert, straight up, what do you think it's been about the Diablo that's taken a little bit longer than its older brother in the Countach, little brother in the Mercy, Aventador? What do you think it's been the Diablo? What's held the Diablo first few years a little bit more back? By the way, this is a great thing for us, but let's just be realistic because it's going to
Yeah.
happen. But what do you think it's been that it's taken that car a little bit longer than its other successors and predecessors?
Well, you look at, what you could probably buy a driver quality example of a 91 to 93 two-wheel drive Diablo for today, and which is probably in the low to mid twos.
Which is
And
awesome, awesome
it's a
money for
ton
that
of
car.
car for that money. It's as cool as anything you could buy for that. But that car
Agreed.
was 100 grand 3 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is tripling in value in a relatively short amount of time, and it has done very, very well. And
Fair.
if you compare that to the worst Mercy, which you'd say is an '04 E-Gear car that
Mhm.
today is probably give or take 200 to 225 grand for a driver quality example. And you say that relative to the best car, which would actually be, yeah, I mean, it'd be one of the five manual SVs, which would be 5 million plus, or one of the best manual 640 Roadsters, which would be 3 million plus. Then, you compare that to the fact that, a great Diablo SE30 Yoda is mid twos and a
Mhm.
great GT is low threes. So, on a percentage basis, your bookend on that low end is still proportionate to where we would be with Mercies.
Yeah.
And you'd say the same thing for Countach's, like, mid 80s 5000S injected US car is four and change, up to the best, LP 400 Series 2 or Periscopio car, is maybe two and
Mhm.
change. So when we think about the range, they all kind of settle in.
Mhm.
Muras are tighter, if you don't count the SVJs. So I would say that, I think you're right that is a really, really fun thing. One thing I've always wanted to do is, you have these fractionalizing programs like Rally and other things that allow you to buy a share in this car. And there have been some people that have explored, more index style collections of cars. And we had, what I would want to do is buy the worst example of every generation of the V12 manual Lambos and get a Mura, Countach, Diablo, Mercy. And every time I can find a worse one, I sell my second worst car and pocket the money, and that becomes the operational fund of the business. And then everybody's like, their basis is going to still go up, their value is going to
Yeah.
go up, and there's going to be cash to kick out. And it'd be the most entertaining process ever because you'd have every time somebody's like, well, I don't think mine's quite as nice as the VinWiki car, so I'm going to make them an offer of my car in 20 grand, and I'll take it, put the 20 in the kitty, and we're going to have a worse one.
I'm in. I'm
There
in.
you go.
That might be the next amazing VinWiki story and the next business venture to go ahead and go off. That might be what
I'm
funds
not sure where the
season
profit
12
to
of
me
Car
comes
Trek,
in
bro.
there, but it would be along for the ride.
I'm with you, man. Um, Listen, if you have the means and if you are an enormous Diablo fan, Ed and I are here to tell you buy the damn Diablo. Like buy them. They are so cool because if you're a fan of I know a lot of Countach fans are not going to like what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it regardless. If you are a fan of Countach, the Diablo is better. The Diablo is just a better car than the 25th anniversary Countach, which I know that there's not that big of a contingent out there that loves the 25th anniversaries. I get it. It's tough. Like to me, like the 5,000 QVs are probably the chef's kiss of that entire Countach range and whatnot. But like you look at a Diablo and you're like, yeah, man, they did everything better than what the best Countach was. And I think, that's been the MO of Lamborghini as it continues over the last 60 plus years, is in particular from Countach up until where we've gotten to with Revuelto. Like Aventador to Revuelto. And it's like, okay, well, how do we make this better? And it's like, well, let's go ahead and start with putting a dual clutch into this car. Because the shifts are still going to be ridiculous, but now you can really enjoy the presence of driving this daily while also having this like rambunctious psychotic thing behind you. And I don't care if anybody has a problem with the hybrid assist, it makes the car not better but more powerful, which takes it to a whole different stratosphere of like potential and coolness. And so, what we've seen from Lamborghini over the last 15 years as it continues to progress in the V12 line is every new model has been a little bit better than than the last one it ended with, if that makes sense. And
Sure.
it's been amazing what Lamborghini has been able to accomplish. Um, Not just with the V12 ranges. I mean, the Gallardos, the last like 3 years of Gallardos were awesome,
Wonderful cars.
man.
Yep.
Like you had the was it first generation that you used for the first car track? The flood car?
First Spider. Yep.
First Spider.
Mhm.
My brother in Christ, let me tell you, I have to give you so much press for wanting to deal with that car.
I enjoyed it. But when you think about what you could buy today. Like if you
Yeah.
bought an early Diablo, a very low value Mercy,
Mhm.
which would be also low twos. So low twos, and let's just say you buy a 13, 14 Aventador coupe, also high twos, 300 grand. So for three giant cars, that's I'm not saying that's not a lot, but for less than a new 12 cylindry, less than a high option Temerario, less than a Revuelto, you could have all three generations of your cars and let somebody walk into your, call it seven, $800,000 car collection that is headed in the right direction value wise.
Yep.
And you look like somebody who really knows what they're talking about.
Agreed.
And these are relatively easy cars to finance. And I'm not saying that buying seven, $800,000 of cars should be something taken lightly. But if if you want to look like a genius, both immediately when somebody comes and sees them, but
Yeah.
also financially in the future, I'm not hiding and I don't
Yeah.
have them. But like, do it,
Do the thing. Do the thing.
do the
I
thing.
couldn't I couldn't agree with you more. I'll get us close to the end here and whatnot. And it's been the biggest of treats to get a chance to go ahead and chat with you, man. And you've given me so much of your time, and I appreciate you. The Veyron was the creme de la creme, not just in terms of what it is as a car. And, Jeremy Clarkson said it best back in the day on Top Core. Like, that is our Concord, excuse me. And it is. And yeah, we've seen Chiron. Yeah, we got Tourbillon coming and stuff. Like, Tourbillon's going to be insane. Like, I cannot wait for that car. It really is like next level. But the Veyron, what it meant when it came out in 20 years. Oh my gosh, it's 20 years, the Veyron. Unreal. What years is yours? 08 or 07?
12.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Yep.
And so it's amazing to see what that car represented. When you had the chance to finally go after this car and whatnot, like, how do you in your mind think to yourself, this is this is the moment to go ahead and do it now? Because they the market has been kind to Veyron owners in the best way possible, but it is still an enormous stretch. How do you view it? Not necessarily from the stretch financially per se, but from saying to yourself, there's probably not anything better or more impressive from that time frame than the Veyron itself. So you say, I'm going after it, and this is what I have to get rid of, but look what I have in the end, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right there that it was the right kind of end game acquisition target, in terms of what this chapter of my career means. And I loved it for that, the fact that the stars aligned and the financing and the credit came into play and we got there. Thanks,
You
Premier
know,
Financial Services, for everything.
shout out.
And, so yes, the market has recognized it, I think, for good reason. And, there are just so few of them that are in decent condition, mine not among those necessarily, that are on the market to kind of be those bellwether moments. But I uh, I agree that the car is both significant technologically in what it represents and what it ushered in, but I think it's much more significant emotionally when you
Agreed.
have all the King's horses and all the King's men at Volkswagen just deciding that it must happen and it must do what it can do. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that I think is what cemented it, not just as the first $1 million plus MSRP vehicle, but as something that the world was going to pursue differently over time. The reason that I pushed so hard to do it then was that I had a belief that in the same way that a lot of us grew up with Ferraris and Lamborghinis being the halo cars, the poster cars that we pursued, I believe that the generation that is younger than me is much more hypercar obsessed.
Agreed.
And I believed that the value trajectory of Pagani, Koenigsegg, Bugatti, plus the halo cars from the traditional brands was going to grossly outperform the more regular cars from the brands that we already love. And so I wanted to get one while there was still a chance, and I found the right circumstance where a Grand Sport had kind of been devalued enough to be eligible, and it worked. And yeah, it's worth more now than what I paid for it. Even as I drive it, I've more than doubled the miles.
Love to see it.
But it's been a good thing.
Yeah. And it's one of those cars that I feel in the same way with the two Mercies and even with the Diablo. It's one of those cars that I mean, things can always change. You can change your mind tomorrow and whatnot and say, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm ready to move on. But I do feel that that's one of those cars that you would want to go ahead and keep for as long as you humanly possibly can. And that to me is so cool that it's a piece of history, but also a piece of your life. It's an enormous piece of your life. It's you mentioned an end goal. It is a trajectory to where you have gotten to after decade plus run of building this amazing portion of the automotive community and whatnot to where you've gotten to today. And the fact that tomorrow you get a chance to go ahead and celebrate 9 years of where the VinWiki channel started and everything like that just is what a journey to for you to have accomplished it. But let me say from my perspective, what a journey for me to have been able to go ahead and see somebody be able to pull off and entertain me and bring us all the joy that you have over these last few years, man. So genuinely, like the stars couldn't have lined better to go ahead and for us do a 200th episode with Ed Bolian while tomorrow he celebrates his 9 year anniversary of the channel. How cool is that? That's that
It's
just you can't write that script. Right? Any screenplay writers out there, they're going to try and mimic this. You can't. All right, I'm sorry. The emoji, the gif of like writing with fire. This is the writing with fire happening in real time, and you love to see it. Ed, it's I can't wait to find more perfect way to end this podcast tonight. So I'll ask you this, and this is a question that I haven't been able to ask for a long time because we've had a lot of great guests that have been on before, and so this is your first time as a guest of Tormenting Tarmac. And I always like to ask people, what does car culture mean to Ed Bolian?
I love that when we all say that we love cars, we all mean something different. And I think that, it's so fun to have that idea in common and be, amongst our friends that don't care about cars, we're that car guy, but that means something different for you, something different for me, something different for all of us. And I think, it's one of these hobbies that we can obsess over and enjoy for, our whole lives. And there are so many other things that come and go and don't last and don't work, and these don't last and they don't work either, but we can pursue them working better for a very, very long time. And so I very much appreciate that about the hobby, about the culture. And I can't be critical of what anybody means when they say they love cars, and they're welcome to criticize me. I'll enjoy that probably, and I get it in the comments every day. But I'm excited to see where it goes, and even that if it's just our moment in time of when anybody cares or when we get to care about this stuff, it's great fun.
I love it. You couldn't have said it better, man. What a treat this podcast has been, man. Genuinely appreciate you. I hope that this is not the only time we ever have you on back on TT. I'd love for there's so much more. There's so many other places we can go ahead and take our conversations to, but I also recognize it is 10 plus in the evening over in the ATL. So I very much appreciate it. Before I go, Michael Zimmerman wanted me to go ahead and send you his regards. He's a good friend of the podcast. Today, I think I can say this because he put it up on his Instagram stories. He picked up a 550 Maranello. What a
Ooh,
G. What a
there we
G.
go.
Come on. Out of boy Michael. And shout out to his lovely wife Samantha, who's also a friend of this podcast. And I would be remiss to not shout out Callie Moldovan, who was the person who went ahead and put me in touch with you. She's a good friend of this show, has done VinWiki stories in the past, and she
That's
was
right.
incredibly awesome. And she's a good friend, and she got us in contact together. So big
I'm
shout out
glad
to
she
Callie.
did. Very, very good.
I'm very happy. But for those of you who are living under a rock and you're not familiar with VinWiki on YouTube, it's VinWiki, VinWiki. Go check it out. Of course, the VinWiki app is still out there alive and kicking and helping people like Greg Oxer and a lot of other individuals try and figure out whether or not LP670 SVs are a one-off color and all these other fun, cool things. And anything else that we should go ahead and shout out, my friend, before we go ahead and wrap it on up tonight?
I think that's it. Thanks so much. Like, subscribe, and I can't wait to see what the 400th episode looks like.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Here's to another decade of VinWiki and everything like that. Ladies and gentlemen, that's of course one of the goats, Ed Bolian. My name is Jorge Aquino, and you have all been listening to the 200th, 200, baby. We're not going anywhere. Installment of Tormenting Tarmac is a podcast where the enthusiast never dies. Thank you very much for everything, Ed. You're the man. Good night, everybody.
Good night.